Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to dive right in. We have a lot of ground to cover. We'll have some time for questions afterwards, and I'll be around this afternoon. So if you do have more questions, I'm more than happy to talk with you about that. We're going to just start off with kind of giving you the lay of the landscape at Vision Solutions. We're about a $100 million software company. We've got right about 400 employees, and we've got a really high release velocity. We've come together as a result of a handful of acquisitions, and so we have 9 active products that we're delivering with a very geographically dispersed workforce. And so I've got 4 product managers that are managing the 9 products, and we've got 5 different R&D centers in 5 different time zones as a result of the acquisitions that we've done, and most of the product managers are not co-located with their development team, and so we had a real challenge to get the collaboration going and get everybody working together in a way that was effective. One of the companies that we acquired was using Confluence, and as you would see as a wiki in the way that wikis were originally built, in a very non-structured, free-form way of collaborating and sharing information. My needs were a little bit different for the kinds of things that I needed to do. And when I started looking at the richness of what was available from a plug-in and macro perspective, light bulbs just started going off all over the place for me, and said, I finally think I know how I'm going to get my arms around this beast that we've got with all of these companies coming together and people scattered about the globe. Since I even put this presentation together, we announced that we're entering into another acquisition. Vision Solutions does disaster recovery, high availability software, data replication, has been primarily in the IBM System I space, but also with an AIX solution. And we just announced about 3 weeks ago that we had signed a definitive agreement to acquire DoubleTake Software, which is Windows-based replication, clustering, disaster recovery system. That is going to double the size of the company. Again, we'll be about 800 employees, and we'll add in a couple more development centers and some more product managers. And the great thing is that I'm feeling extremely confident that I've got the right tools in place now to fold all of those new folks and new products into a process that will be very manageable and give our investors a perspective and a view of the portfolio that they expect to see. So what we're going to do is just take a look at what it is that we built. So we're looking at a Confluence page, and I'll just take you a step through some different things that are there that are useful for me. Some things are just links. This is just a link to an attachment. It's my product roadmap presentation that my product managers keep updated in PowerPoint on a regular basis, and they attach it there. The second thing here is our processes. So, and we're going to look at some of this stuff and drill down a little bit in a second, but we have our release processes, and you're always wondering, where are you in the midst of that process, and how does that work with the rest of the organizations, the documentation folks, and the customer care folks, and who's trained, and all of those kinds of things. Those processes are defined here, and they are also linked to help. If you look over in the far right column where you see for a particular release, are we 100% complete, 50%? That's all tied into the processes that are displayed on that second piece. The third piece here, for all of our service pack planning, you can go in and there's links into JIRA so that you can see all of the issues that are tied to a particular service pack. We've written some JDBC drivers, and in addition to go into a data mart, in addition to that, using the JIRA issues macro to be able to pull stuff into Confluence from JIRA. And then we have a repository for all of the collateral that we're developing, kind of the seed material that we develop as a product management team that we hand off to our product marketing team, which again, none of them are located in the same physical place. So this is a great place for people to get that information, share it, update it, and have it as a regular repository. The last thing before we dive in here, just again to give you the lay of the landscape, we have products that fall into particular market segments. We have our System I HA products, we have our AIX availability products, we have our systems management tools, and we'll be adding in here the double take portfolio. And I've aggregated all of the release information of the product lifecycle together by those product groupings. So you'll see down in that page where you've got each row representing a product and a release number. So if we look at the top there, you see we've got Itera HA, the first row, version 5.0. It's in GA. There's no particular remarks. If you clicked on that, it would just take you to a child page where you could go look at details about that release. And then each one of the links across the row where you see SP05, that's a service pack. The hyperlink there, once we actually put the service pack out, that's a link to the PDF document that went out. That is the release document itself that went out as a notification to our customers for a product that's been end of life. The end of life notice is a hyperlink to it. So all of the documents that we distribute are available at the touch of the finger from that perspective. And we're going to dig into the Itera HA page. You notice there's a link that's going to take you down to a child page that tells you everything you want to know about that particular product, Itera HA. If I clicked on the release, the V5.0 hyperlink, then it's going to take me to a release-specific page that's going to tell me everything that I want to know about that particular release. Here's what I was saying. If you had clicked on the process link, you would see that we've got the swim lanes set up and a definition of all of the processes and assigned a percentage complete to each step along the way. So that all that information can be updated. And what you're going to see, I'm kind of give you the landscape of what's out there, and in the second part here, I'll show you how did we create that, what Confluence commands, what macros did we use to make all of this stuff happen. So some of the mystery will dissolve for you in that. If you look at the resources, the additional resources that we have where we keep our repository, we've just organized it in a way so that it's easy to find the information relative to a particular product. The size, believe it or not, we still have people in South America and Europe that have low bandwidth and they want to know how big something is before they're going to download it, so they can pick out when they're going to do those kinds of things. If you take a dive down into Itera HA, into a particular product page, you're going to see information that would be similar to what you would see in an MRD, but then also some information that talks about reference customers, competitive analysis. And what's really cool about the way that this is, what we were able to do with Confluence, we used heavily metadata definitions and labels to be able to identify and pull information up in an organized way into the dashboard. But the product manager, all they do is maintain two pages. They maintain a release page and they maintain a product page, and that's all they do. Everything else, because of the way that we've structured it, we used some scaffolding to help structure the input. We use live templates to be able to standardize the way that the data goes, the way a product manager is prompted for the data, so it's consistent and all wrapped around metadata definitions. So all that stuff can be summarized and pulled back up into the dashboard. Release level information, and I'm showing you here just cutouts. This is all stuff that's just on a single page. In the PowerPoint, I had to kind of chop it up so you could sort of see the headers of each section, because the page is a very long page that you would need to scroll through, which I could do if we had time for the live demo. Happy to share some of that information with you later if you wanted to do that. So this is, if you had just gotten onto the ITERA HA v5.0 release page, you would see at the top the release, the elevator pitch, the features and benefits, key marketing messages, other helpful links, and links that would allow you to go see the actual requirements that are defined, that we define out in JIRA. And we use the JIRA issues macro to be able to pull that information in. So we use JIRA not only as a way for tracking issues in the organization, but also for tracking requirements. And then we use those. We can track time against those requirements, so I know how much time a particular developer in an organization is spending on a particular release. I can look at what we're doing from a sustaining perspective versus new software development. We've built integrations in addition to this into Salesforce, and so I pull all my revenue numbers into this, and I can balance off the revenue against the investment that we're making as an R&D organization on a particular profit to get to the profitability on a product. So it's all pretty cool in the way that this stuff comes together there. Talked about this. This is just click on a link. You want to see what the end of life notice is. You've got it there. Some of the key things that we had to use because of the amount of data on the page, we used the cache macro to help speed up the rendering of the page. I use anchors to help navigate on the page so that you can, jump to different places on the page. So if you want to go straight to the systems management tools and see what's going on there, you can just click on that. Obviously the decks and the cards. And then the table plus and the metadata report is what actually creates the display of these rows on the dashboard page and pulls that information and data up. A key for me in terms of what shows up on this dashboard is a pretty extensive use of labels. So if you looked at the release page, that's defined as a live template, and the live template tags that page as a release. So it's got the label release on it. So I know how to find every page that's a release. The product page are tagged with a label called product. Then you can use the checklist macro to identify all of those pages, all of the things that are release pages, to subsequently push additional labels from a pick list onto those pages. So I can pick a label that says publish. I can pick a label that says it belongs to this product family. I can pick a label that says this is a GA release or a beta release. Then once you've done all of that, then you can use those labels to help populate your dashboard with the information that you want using the metadata report command. So a product manager can be working on a new release and getting his page set up, and if he doesn't push the publish label onto it, it's not going to show up in my production dashboard. My CTO is not going to see it until it's ready for prime time. So if you look at sort of the structure and the things that the way that the thing is set up for us, the control panel, what I call it, is that's where we put the checklist macro that basically controls what's going to show up where with which labels. There's the product dashboard that we've been looking at mostly, which is the display of all of the releases and the timeline for the release schedule. Then there's pages that have the processes that I alluded to that show you it's 100%, we're 80%, where are we in the release process. We created quite a few images and artwork, so I've got a page where I've got all my artwork organized, so all the little percentage indicators and the little dots and all the pretty stuff that you see there is just, all little images that are sitting out on that page that we reference, and the additional resources. And then you can see as we add products, it's very simple. to add another product page, and we just use that add page reference, the live template, and then from the product page you can click on it and add a release page. So it's very self-sustaining for to roll out into the organization, that a new product manager can come in and we just say add a product page, click on a link, create a release page, go populate it with the information using scaffolding, by the way. So with the with all of the input fields with pick lists and with fields defined with the metadata wrapped around it, all they're really having to do is enter text and information, and it automatically gets captured and wrapped and defined as the metadata that's needed in order to suck that information up and be able to display it in the dashboard. And so those are some of the techniques that we've used to create some of the structure that makes it something that I can roll out and get a consistent view into the organization and what we're doing. I mentioned that we have Salesforce, and right now we pull information out of those systems and we put into a data mart along with some JIRA information, and that's where we have our JDBC connections, and we've written some SQL macros to pull that information out of that data mart, and it's what allows me to integrate these systems and display some things in context with some things that are in some of the disparate systems. And so now we have a set of user macros that are defined that are basically SQL queries that give us information out of that data mart that I can display on any of the pages that I want to create for whatever purpose. To, next time the CEO says he wants to see something, I just do it. We put the meeting together, the page is ready, we go and have our meeting and everything's there. Have the ability, then people can make their comments, the people subscribe to the pages, and everybody's talking, Joe in Chicago and Paul in Dorchester, England, and Doug Piper sitting in Irvine, California, all working on the same stuff together. So that's an example. You can look at what's going on with our license revenue trends based on information that comes from the data mart that we pulled out of Salesforce, pulled into the chart macro. You see below in the bottom left-hand corner all of our time tracking in terms of what's been worked on from a JIRA issues perspective as the developers are logging time against a particular product and product release, so I know where all of our development resources are being invested, and I can see all of that as a link off of my product dashboard. And that's pretty much the story. I don't know where we are on time, if you want to take a couple questions now or if you want to jump right in.
Good afternoon. Hi everyone, welcome to Atlassian Summit. I'm here to talk to you today about getting agile with your requirements and how that can really help you deliver software faster. As Bill mentioned, I'm the technical lead on the Confluence team. I've shipped 12 major releases of Confluence and more than 40 minor releases in the last 4.5 years. And one thing that I've really seen at Atlassian is we ship quality software really quickly. And software is a really competitive industry these days, and shipping software really fast can help you gain market share, can help you be the innovators, and I think a lot of you are probably interested in understanding how Atlassian does that. How do we ship software every 3 months and make sure it still works? How do we even get the ideas for software? And that's what this presentation is about. My job involves the full life cycle of software development. I meet with customers at conferences and user meetings, write the specs, plan and track tasks through the release, and also work on the development tasks. The Confluence team itself is about 25 developers and 2 testers and a bunch of documentation, other staff that help us out. So what comes to mind when I say requirements? Maybe we can just have a quick show of hands. Who's involved with writing specifications or requirements documents here? Oh, quite a lot of people. That's cool. What about other people who work with requirements documents, like have to develop software based on requirements documents? Okay, just a few. So one of the things that comes to mind for me when I say requirements is massive specification documents. Is that a problem for anyone here? Yep. Yeah, the problem with massive documents is they're so hard to work with. They take a long time to read, take a long time to write, and a really hard medium for discussion with people, particularly if they're stored in something like Microsoft Word. You end up with a very painful and drawn-out specification process. The process usually involves really long meetings to go through the specification document page by page, section by section, bullet point by bullet point, and just make sure that everything's correct. And yeah, sitting in those meetings isn't really fun for anybody, so that's one thing we want to try and get rid of. Change management is a huge problem if you're using something like Word or even SharePoint. I don't think the change management functionality is really quite there. And so, yeah, that's something we're really trying to address with our specification process. So how the Confluence team works is we use the tools we have, so a bunch of Atlassian tools, some open source and free tools as well. We use a lightweight process, so our goal is really to get into development as fast as possible. We don't want to spend a lot of time speccing out things, write some really long documents, and then maybe, you know, in 6 months' time, one of our competitors has beaten us to market already. We really want to do the minimum amount of work we can on the requirements as fast as possible to get the working software out there. We want to be open and transparent in our company and with our community as well. So we're, you know, blogging and talking about what we're working on. We're having peep shows and all kinds of random stuff to share information with the community. And internally, we're even more open and transparent. All our specs, all our documents around the planning for our products are open to everyone in the company to comment on and edit. Not that much editing goes on, but there's a lot of commenting from everyone across the organization. And what that relies upon is an individual responsibility. And it's something that maybe you don't think you have, but when you start opening up these specifications for comments, you see that people really take ownership of their comments. They're not there to, you know, make fun of the team. They're really there to help everybody out and provide constructive feedback. So that's something that we've seen a huge benefit from with our process. So at a very, very high level, it looks like this. I've kind of got the product icons there for each of the Atlassian products we use in each phase. It's not just Atlassian products, there are a bunch of other stuff. But so to start with, we're talking about customer stories, information directly from customers, which we put in Confluence. We kind of drill that down into a number of JIRA issues and feature requests. You've probably seen a bunch of them on our public issue tracker if you've ever raised a bug or feature request for JIRA or Confluence. That gets turned into actual specification documents in Confluence. We get a whole bunch of feedback internally. And finally, we're using JIRA again for the task tracking at the other end with Greenhopper. So let's delve into that process a bit more and start at the beginning. The start's always talking to customers. We spend a lot of time talking to customers at conferences like this. You get a whole stack of notes in your notepad or your iPad, maybe, if you're lucky to have one. And you take it back to the office. What do you do with it? You write it up into Confluence. We write really long, detailed notes about everything, every piece of information we got from that customer when we went to go and see them. So there's some notes from Adobe that I unfortunately can't share all the details with you. They're very interesting. But yeah, and it's really about making sure that information's captured somewhere, because it's so easy to start off your requirements process and just jump straight into a spreadsheet and start listing out those requirements, you know, one by one as bullet points, and that really loses so much detailed information about what the customer's doing, like what's their business, what are their problems. And that's the information we're really trying to capture here in these documents. We want to have all that information so that later on in the process, the wiki is the reference document. It's the source of information. And you can always go back to that document to understand, why are we doing this thing? Why are we building this feature? The wiki has the answer. JIRA issues are the next step in our requirements process. As you've probably seen, we have a whole bunch of JIRA issues for all our projects, and it's important to go through and summarize the key aspects of what each customer wants. Discovering duplicates is a key part of that. We expect our product managers and our developers to search through JIRA regularly, looking for duplicates before they raise new issues. You can link the JIRA documentation back to the Confluence page with a private comment, and that's something we do heavily. not just for documentation of the requirements, but also for support cases. If we get cases from customers who need a new feature or who are just really annoyed with a particular bug, we're linking the support cases and all the documentation related to a particular feature back to that information. And what that means is that when we, later down the road, when we finally implement that feature, it's really easy to go back to the customer and say, hey, Adobe, or hey, Cisco, or any customer, and say, we fixed this issue. You guys want to try upgrading to 3.2? It has the fix that you want. And that just, building that relationship with customers is another important part of this process. If you start raising every single feature request you have in JIRA, you'll very shortly have a problem on your hands. And that is that you have an extremely large number of issues. So maybe another show of hands. Who has more than 10,000 issues in their JIRA issue tracker? Oh yeah, a few. More than 20,000? More than 30,000? Oh wow, it goes up. Don't tell the JIRA guys. I think they've got a limit on that now, right? Yeah, so organizing the JIRA issues is probably one of the biggest problems if you start tracking requirements to JIRA. The best single way we've found for tracking requirements and categorizing them is the labels system. The best part about labels is that you don't need to be an administrator to create them. Any user can go in there and start coming up with a system for labeling issues. And what you do is you document that on the wiki. What labels are you using? What do they stand for? And they don't have to be complicated. You don't have to use code names. You can just say exactly what it is. This is a notification issue. This is something about installation and setup. And you can also make it relate to your planning. When you're planning a new release, go in there, label a bunch of issues you're planning to work on, and then you can pull that into Confluence very easily. Components are another way of categorizing JIRA issues. It works pretty well if you have a clearly defined set of components in your product. For us, we tried to come up with components that really make the chunks of issues evenly sized. So 40 to 50 issues is a good size. And the reason for that is that you can actually delegate responsibility for those components in your team. So we have 25 developers, as I said. It maps pretty well onto about 25 components. So what we do is we just pick someone in the team. We say, hey, Joe, you're in charge of macros. You got to be on top of these macros. We want you to watch the incoming issues and just be aware of the issues that are there. Make sure that the duplicates get covered off and that sort of thing, because when you have 6,000 issues, it's basically impossible for one person to keep all the issues in their head. You just have to split that up somehow within your team. And components or versions as well, when you're working on scheduled releases, can help you delegate that responsibility out a bit easier in an Agile team. The next step is moving on to specifications. The specifications, like most specifications, have a list of stories or tasks or requirements in the document. What you can see there on the right is actually just one requirements document split up like Doug's one. It's just a bit too hard to fit it on that thing. So, normally you'd include prioritized lists of stories, and JIRA issues macros are great for pulling in JIRA issues. That's all pretty standard stuff, I'm sure. But where Confluence gets really good at managing requirements documents and specifications is rich content. We use balsamic mockups, glyphy diagrams. I don't know, who saw the pirate presentation before? You guys see a bunch of pirates? Yeah, that glyphy 3 stuff looks really, really cool. I'm keen to check that out. I haven't used it yet. And Balsamic has just had a new release in the last couple of months too. And their mockup tool we use like all the time. It's really good for doing UI mockups, drag around some controls and lay stuff out. But the thing that it really wins over using something like Visio is that the changes are really tracked with your specification document. So every time you go in and you edit that diagram, everyone in your team's notified that you've updated the diagram. Everyone in your team can see the changes. They can go back through previous versions and see what's been evolving on your diagram as time goes on. And that's the same with all the rich content in Confluence. Building in the Excel macro, the PowerPoint slides, whatever it is, as you're working on it, it stays versioned and controlled with the wiki. So it's much more useful than having all these documents on your shared drive with unknowable versions. The next thing from there is like getting feedback on your specifications, right? And again, Confluence is quite good at that, and we use it really heavily internally for gathering feedback and comments. Here we go. Yeah, the most important thing about comments is that you respond to them, basically. If people put comments on your specs and you just leave them there, it's kind of killing the vibe. No one's going to really come and comment on your specs anymore. And one thing we've found is that if you encourage people to add comments, then you get a whole bunch of discussion on your specs. We have found not just the team members themselves, but also other interested people in the company. They really help you discover problems even earlier. You know, someone in a completely different department might have come across the exact same problem or a problem in what you're trying to do, and they'll let you know about it before you hit that problem. We use a lightweight sign-off mechanism. We just drop a task list or a table in the page and just let people tick it off when they're happy with the page. Again, that's all tracked in the version history, so to keep the process lightweight, we don't want to try and lock down pages or anything like that. We just want to make sure that all the information's there if we do need to go back and say, well, did that guy really approve that version of the page, or did someone change it afterwards or whatever? In practice, it never happens, but it's there if we need it. So our policies on our wiki are quite different, perhaps, to some companies. Everything's open by default. We only restrict the access when we absolutely need to, and we allow commenting on almost everything. And as I said before, the replying to the comments is vitally important, and also integrating the feedback. So just go through the comments, say thanks for your feedback, put it in, and then just get rid of the comments. And what that really means is that your document stays as kind of one piece. If you have a document and then a bunch of comments below, it really looks, it's untidy, and it's hard for people to understand what the final state of the document was. Did these comments get integrated? Did they not? If you reply and then you have a policy of, say, 1 or 2 days after you reply, you clean up those comments, then everyone is happy that their feedback's being integrated, and you still have a clean and readable specification for people to look at. Keeping your team up to date is what the wiki's best at, I think. RSS feeds, mail. We label all our specifications in Confluence so you can pull them out with an RSS feed. Mike and Scott, I think, have RSS feeds on our specifications so they can keep an eye on what's going on. We have some great new features coming in Confluence 3.3 for notifications, so keeping track of blog posts and people in your network is going to be much easier from the next release. So that should also help with specifications, because you can tell people if they're interested in what you're working on, follow you and they'll be notified. Tracking requirements through development, again, is something that a lot of other people here are going to talk about in more depth. We use JIRA and Greenhopper. It's quite easy with the Greenhopper quick issue entry screen to drop in a bunch of issues into JIRA. It doesn't take more than 10 or 20 minutes to type up, 50 or 100 tasks into JIRA for tracking. The developers track them through to completion. That's all pretty straightforward stuff. One thing that is actually really cool about how we do releases with Confluence is publishing internal release notes. So with our Agile process, we do bi-weekly. Is that what you call them here? Yeah. Releases every 2 weeks, let's say that. And what we want to do is release it internally for testing and just practice all our processes. And that means publishing release notes and getting it out there that we're working on new stuff all the time. Right from here, you can tie this all the way back through the JIRA issues to the Confluence stories about why you're building this stuff. Why are we building a macro browser? We can link that back to the customers who told us they wanted to enter macros in easier, the very stories that we wrote in at the beginning. And that really, ties it together for people, makes you feel like you're really addressing people's problems, and everyone can really get involved in the release process, because the developers put up their notes about what they're working on. Everyone jumps in there and says, wow, that's a great feature. And it's a really good feeling when people are happy to see progress. So what's the results from using this process? The customer request can basically be tracked all the way through our system through a number of links. It's a really lightweight process, as I said. It doesn't try to control things too much or really tie you down. Most of the links are literally just hyperlinks from one system to the next. But the thing is, if you want to track something like that down, it's not hard to do. The specifications and the release notes on our wiki are the most popular pages in our space. This is the Confluence development space. And you can see sometimes we get more than 50 comments on some of our release notes and specifications. And all those comments are constructive comments. They're feeding into the development process and just making our product better with every release. So I think that's just an amazing result for such a simple process. So in summary, I'd just like to urge you to try using Confluence and JIRA for requirements tracking if you're not already. Learn about the integration points, the JIRA issues macro, labels, allow feedback on your specs and requirements pages, integrate it well, and just make the requirements documents the start of a discussion about the software that you're working on in your organization. So thank you. Yeah, so our release notes and our specs are written up in Confluence on our intranet initially, and then the final versions are published to our public wiki on confluence.atlassian.com.
Is this true for some of your other documentation as well, or just for?
So the documentation that relates to the source code, like Java docs, API documentation, is kept in the source control system and generated, and then the documentation that's written by hand, so the documentation you see, our product documentation and our release notes and stuff is maintained in the wiki, yeah, kept in the wiki. Thanks.
Just one more question, just sorry, so we can keep it going.
More question, yeah, down here?
So you're using JIRA for both managing feature requests and tasks.
Yes.
How do you manage the links between those JIRA issues, say feature requests and tasks?
Right. So the question was, if we use JIRA for both task management and tracking feature requests, how do we distinguish between the two different types of issues and how do we link them together? We tend to use two different projects, sometimes two different instances of JIRA. It's best if you can use two projects on the same instance because issue links are a really good way of tying feature requests through to the work that you're doing. The other thing that we have done from time to time, if it's a smaller project, you can use subtasks in the same project. And I guess the benefit of our open process with customers is that we're usually not worried if customers see what we're working on. So if you need to keep your feature requests like separate security-wise, then a separate instance might be necessary, and then you'd have to just use hyperlinks basically to link back to the feature request that created the tasks. Yeah. Again, I don't think it's something that we're really missing, having a really tight integration there. It's just enough for people to paste in a link and then be able to follow it back to the original issue later. That works okay for us. Thank you.